Hello, Dr. Kevin and friends. Today I would like to facilitate a discussion within a topic about differentiation. The discussion will be based on Chapter 4 of our textbook, Handbook of Effective Literacy Instruction, Research-Based Practice K through 8 by Taylor and Duke. And in addition, the discussion will be based on an article from the Reading Teacher Journal of International Reading Association entitled Differentiated Instruction Making Informed Teacher Decisions by Susan Watts-Davey et al. I will provide other resources to support the discussion. There will also be leading questions. These leading questions will help us to focus and really reflect its subtopics of our discussion. Besides, in the end of the session, there will be other questions for us to discuss the whole discussion that we have. Those questions will need your participation to post your response in D2L within the thread of this webinar. So let us start to discuss about differentiation. Let us begin our discussion with question. What do you know about differentiated instruction or differentiated teaching? Have you ever heard about it before? I will give you some time to recall your understanding. Okay, now let's check with one of an expert of differentiated instruction. I believe you know Carol Ann Tomlinson. She wrote over 200 articles, chapters, books, professional development materials, especially in differentiated classroom. Lots of them have been translated into 12 languages. She had careers as public school teacher, program administrator, and university professor. She received several awards throughout her career. And so let's hear her opinion about what is differentiated instruction.
I think differentiated instruction actually is just teaching with a child in mind. It suggests that we have a responsibility to teach students content, but also that we have to always bear in mind that we teach that content to students, to human beings, and that not all students will understand it the same way or in the same length of time, make the same connections, need the same support system. So differentiated instruction is a way of thinking about teaching, which suggests that we establish very clear learning goals that are very substantial, and then that we teach with an eye on the student, so that we're constantly trying to ascertain where the student is relative to where we're going, and then making adjustments as necessary to make sure that all of the students go with us on the learning journey and arrive at the end where they need to be. For that reason, then, differentiation suggests to us that we need to look at those learning goals and ask how we might adjust our teaching in terms of students' varied readiness levels, their particular interests, and their particular modes of learning, so that learning works, so that it fits for each student in the classroom. We often think about students in a classroom as though the class were just one student, and we speak of them as the students like this, the students don't understand this, when in fact it's rare that a particular moment works equally well for all students. And so differentiation asks us to disaggregate the student into individual human beings and to understand what they bring to the classroom in terms of strengths that we can build on and what they bring in terms of needs that we can address to maximize their possibilities for success.
She mentioned that differentiated instruction is about teaching with responsibility content to human being that will not be the same. We should understand that. And she also suggests clear learning goals with an eye of the student, that teacher should make adjustment to make sure that they go with the teaching, and so that learning fit every student in the classroom to make their success. And so to see the list of her works, you can download it through this website to know more sources of differentiated instruction. According to Watzlawick's article, what is differentiated instruction? It is mentioned in the article that differentiated instruction is instruction that allows all students to access the same classroom curriculum by providing entry points, learning tasks, and outcomes tailored to students' learning needs. It's mentioned by Hall, Strangman, and Mayer in 2013 as cited in Watzlawick's article. Taylor and Duke in 2013 through their books tried to describe and picture differentiated instruction by providing teaching vignettes. And in the beginning of the chapter, Taylor and Duke presents two teaching vignettes. The first teaching vignette is about Miss Zachary. Of course, this is a pseudonym's name. So, Miss Zachary in her third grade classroom is dealing with Basil Reader. And I provide you a video that somehow represents the vignette.
We're going to read this story called My Lucky Day. It's by Keiko Kaza. So this is a story about a fox who's preparing to eat the pig. But this might not actually happen because this pig might give the fox some trouble. My Lucky Day by Keiko Kaza. One day, a hungry fox was preparing to hunt for his dinner. And preparing means he was getting ready to do it. As he polished his claws, he was startled by a knock at the door. Everybody say the word startled. Startled. Startled means that if you get startled, that you get scared or something happens that you weren't expecting to happen. So he hears this knock at the door and he gets startled. Everyone say startled. Startled. Okay, if you're startled, your face might look like this. Or the fox might be like, so everybody make a startled face. Oh my gosh, let's see what's gonna happen. Hey, rabbit, someone yelled outside. Are you home? Rabbit, thought the fox. If there were any rabbits in here, I'd eaten them for breakfast. When the fox opened the door, there stood a delicious-looking piglet. Oh no, screamed the piglet. Oh yes, cried the fox, you've come to the right place. He grabbed the piglet and hauled him inside.
What's been described in video 1 is more or less the same with teaching vignette 1 presented in book chapter. Ms. Zachary in teaching vignette 1 becomes the lead of the activity. So she leads the students through the activity that she does most of the reading and the talking. And students are expected to listen and then later on take turns in responding. So that's what happened in teaching vignette 1. What's presented in the first teaching vignette is different with the second teaching vignette. I also provide you the second video that gives you description of what happened in teaching vignette 2.
That's right. While you're reading the story today, look for words that have R-controlled vowels, because you're going to see a lot of those words in your story. But while you're reading, I also want you to think a lot about the characters. Who are the characters of a story?
Marge and Carl.
You think it's going to be Marge and Carl in this story?
After the picture walk, Kelly sets the purpose for reading and also includes a focus on the sound patterns that were introduced and practiced during the word work section of the lesson, and a comprehension skill that will also be supported during whole group instruction.
But also think about the characters, Marge and Carl, because sometimes in a story, when you are learning about the people in the story, the author tells you different kinds of things that they do that helps you understand how they're feeling. And so today, when we
The students will then begin to read the text aloud in a whisper voice. Students will read at their own pace, using skills and strategies to manage text and problem solve. While the students are reading, you will see Kelly listening in on the reading. The folder you will see her using is divided into 4 sections, which represent each of her guided reading groups. Kelly uses sticky notes with each student's name to take anecdotal notes for each reader. She will use these notes to determine teaching points for each student and each group. The notes will be moved at the end of the week to a binder containing a page for each student. This binder will continue to help Kelly plan for guided reading so that the students are increasing reading levels continuously. There are a number of ways to note observations during guided reading. Different methods are used by teachers, and you should find a method that is comfortable for you. The important part of this is that notes are recorded and used over time to move students through increasingly higher level texts. After reading, Kelly discusses and revisits the text with the students. Questions are pre-planned to support the reading purpose of the text. Observation notes can be taken after as well to highlight individual students' comprehension levels and success of the discussion. Most importantly, you will want to note whether the students understood the story. This formative assessment will also help Kelly plan for whole and small group instruction in comprehension skills and strategies.
Why do you think circling the calendar tells us that she's very happy?
Because she already circled 30th when it's still March.
It's still March, but she's already circling the 30th, so it's something that she's really looking forward to. Okay? She's never seen a farm before, so she's excited to do that. Go ahead.
Carl and she said, hurry up and pack.
All right, she said, hurry up and pack. Well, how does that show us that she's excited? What do you think? How do we know she's excited because she told Carl to hurry up and pack?
Because she really wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of guided reading is to teach students to use reading strategies independently and make meaning from print. Ensure students are in the proper instructional groups using ongoing observation and ISIP assessment data. The Daily 5 routines allow students to build stamina and independence in reading and writing during small group reading instruction.
What we've seen in the second video is almost the same with the description of the second teaching vignette. In the second teaching vignette, Miss Ames gives the chance to the students to independently work on the book. So the students are independently reading and solving the problems. And teacher just asks questions because it helps the students to elaborate or explain their thinking as they work with the questions and the activities. Both teaching vignettes are presented as part of the description on effective instruction that emerged from the previous research and from analysis of many years by lots of experts. One of the experts is Taylor et al. In 2003 with the cognitive engagement model. Though both student supportive stance and teacher directed stance are important, and though none of the research mentioned about which one should be given more and which one should be given less, but actually both are part of the cognitive engagement model. And so these are the cognitive engagement model by Taylor et al. In 2003. The first one is higher level talk and writing about text. So this is the effort in engaging students in addition to the lower level questioning. And then the second one is teaching comprehension and word recognition as strategies and not just as skills. The third one, as described in the teaching vignette, is student supportive stance and teacher director stance. We can see the differences of both stance from the teaching vignettes, that in student supportive stance, teachers will tend to teach modeling, in the way of modeling, coaching, and teachers will tend to listen and give feedback. Whereas in teacher director stance, teacher will tend to be the leader. So teacher is primarily telling the students about the information in the lesson and leading the question answer session. And then number 4, part of cognitive engagement model is active responding. This one is very important because every child is given the chance to read, write, and then talk with a partner, or even manipulating materials, not simply just be quiet and listen. So passive responding will be when only students are listening, or taking turns reading, or taking turns writing, or orally responding to the questions. But this is active responding, where every child is very active in responding the lesson. And the 5th one is the teacher should be very clear with the purpose of the lesson. And teachers should also provide appropriate pacing. And why? Because it is important to meet the needs of the specific students that is involved in the lesson. Remember that differentiated instruction is about learning or giving the learning process through the students' eyes, and students' eyes are different. They're in different level, they're in different skills of expertise. In fact, cognitive engagement model takes an important role in differentiated instruction for many reasons. Like, first, teacher provides scaffolding in instruction by adapting learning tasks. And then when they adapt the learning task, of course, teachers will use the data on students' performance and adapting its instruction to meet the needs of the students. And so we call it RTI, the response to intervention model. From those things, students will benefit from teacher modeling and demonstration. that the students actively engage in reading, writing, talking, researching, and experimenting. And of course, the approaches will lead the teachers to the approach of interactive or responding and direct or explicit approach. In order to understand more about cognitive engagement model, there are examples provided for understanding the teachers using the student supportive stance. So we can see from the vignettes example that teachers are providing support for the students in actively applying what they have learned to their own reading and writing. In teaching vignette 3 and 4, there are examples of teachers using the student supportive stance. In the third teaching vignette, we can find examples when students write about what they read, and then following students answer questions to make the connection from what they read. And in the fourth teaching vignette, teachers model how to use decoding strategy during read aloud. So after doing read aloud, and then students apply the strategy in the other activity, which is guided reading group. So both examples are giving the examples of how teachers using the student supportive stance. Not only providing examples of teachers using the student supportive stance, there are also examples of teachers using active pupil engagement. So in those examples, we can see that teacher involves students in active responding by reading, writing, or sharing with a partner. And this kind of activities will give motivation to the students because they're engaging each other and they will have the chance to use what they are learning in the meaningful ways. So we can see from the examples of the fifth teaching vignette, for example here, Mrs. Swenson's kindergarten students have their practice letter formation, concept of print, and familiar sight words. And then what they do after they're practicing them, they will read their stories to their partners. So after writing in terms of practicing the letter formation, concept of print, and familiar sight words, and then what they do next is sharing their stories to their partners. What the teacher do? The teachers are listening and encouraging. The sixth example of teaching vignettes using active pupil engagement is a case of Mr. Owens working with his third grade class. And so in his class, students think of what they would feel if they were in the character of the story. And then after they think, they will share it to their partner. And the last example of teachers using active pupil engagement is the case of Miss Person. So her students read thoroughly and making some inferences of what they know from the story. And they also make connection to something they already know. That's what inferences is. And after they do inferences, then they share their ideas to their partners. Those are examples of teachers using active pupil engagement. But how to do that? Is there any tips or something like that? Yes. There's tips for shifting from passive to active responding daily instruction for teacher. So please read it from left to the right, each point, because they are very connected each other in order. So we can see here, for example, passive responding, that usually teachers do classical round robin reading. So how to make it active responding? Change it to partner reading activities. What about small group round robin reading? The same thing, partner reading activities, or you can do choral or whisper reading. And when teachers usually do passive responding, like taking turns responding in class, it is better to change it into active responding of share to partner, write or show the answer afterwards. The same thing when you do it in class, you can also do it in small group by sharing to partner in writing or showing the answer. And many times teacher makes the students taking turns writing on the board for the answers or ideas or things like that, or vice versa. Students are watching the teacher writing. Instead of doing that passive responding, teacher can change to active responding, becomes activities of individual writing in their own individual whiteboard or their own response journal, or even their own clipboard and paper. So those are tips for shifting from passive to active responding daily instruction. In addition to the tips for shifting from passive to active responding daily instruction, the book also provides suggestions for ongoing professional learning. You will see in the chapter that there are several sessions that you can do for professional learning. There are even things like observation protocol that you can use for the future lesson. And from those suggestions and tips, one more thing provided in the book is the examples of teachers identifying clear purpose for the lesson. So there are 3 more teaching vignettes that we can see from the chapter, that teachers are really clear in stating the purpose of the learning, and not only stating it very clear, the teacher also support the statement of the purpose by describing the activities itself. Like for example, in the 8th teaching vignette, we can see that the teacher tell the students, today we're going to understand the story by stopping along the way to ask and answer questions about what students read. And the next teaching vignette, teacher gives the clear purpose by stating that students will read the new book to identify the unfamiliar words. And how to do that? They're going to list their favorite word recognition strategies. And after they do that, they will write the unfamiliar words and how the way to figure them out on the board so that others can see it. And the last teaching vignette is the teacher gives the clear purpose that the students will practice fluency by using partner reading about what good readers do. Why is it so important that those examples are presented? Well, it is very important. According to Watson Tave et al., in 2013's article, There are several things as the importance of differentiated instruction. Like the first one, because through differentiated instruction, students will greater gains in word reading and reading comprehension, and that they're constantly growing and changing as they participate in various literacy events. And through differentiated instruction, the students will understand and honor the diversity, that they meet the need of unique individual student needs. And differentiated instruction also keep the concepts within response to intervention of each student's need. And plus, differentiated instruction can be held within whole class instruction or small group instruction or even independent instruction. What Stavero mentioned further that effective differentiation is not found in a basal series or even in a particular research-based instructional strategy, whereas it is found in the decisions the teachers make. How do the teachers do that? What Stave et al. Try to give more examples besides the chapters that we have previously. So there's an example on how to do it on primary grade classroom. What Stave gives us a picture of how differentiating text selection and using flexible grouping is part of differentiated instruction in a primary grade classroom. How? By allowing more cognitive energy to be focused on making important connections, as evidence in shared details from their own lives that were related to those of the characters in the book. But how? What's the real example of it? Well, they gives further description of Miss Cooper's class in primary grade classroom. Miss Cooper's differentiated classroom provides differentiated text difficulties and specific content while providing the same intensive instruction on making connections to improve comprehension. And she does that for all of her students. And when we try to look deeper on the research and decision making behind Miss Cooper's differentiation, there are two important things. The first one is dynamic assessment, and the second one is evidence-based practice made by Miss Cooper's. Dynamic assessment. So Miss Cooper's class is held based on her dynamic assessment that in the beginning she learned as much as possible about students and the ways that they learn their best. How to do it? She gathered data from district assessments. Not only that, she observed children closely as they work, and plus she asked questions about their thinking, their methods to solve things. And then, from that, she determined levels and groups of the students in giving instruction. Further, she did the evidence-based practice. And how to do that? She decides on a different strategy. She modifies the process, she modifies the materials, environment, products, or even combination of those. From this, she rearranges children every few weeks according to their reading progress and shifting literacy needs and strengths. From Miss Cooper's differentiated classroom, we learn about several things that teachers can apply. First, assess students carefully and regularly using a variety of formative assessment tools. It is very important to have it variety. And then, second one, decide on a differentiation strategy that you're going to use. Next, organize the literacy block to accommodate small groups of children learning together. Keeping the chance of small group of children learning together is very important. Next, match the text to the readers. Remember, we have to try to adapt our materials into differentiated instruction based on the students' needs. And the last one, use a gradual release of responsibility model in teaching. Students need to be involved in their own learning. They have the right to given the chance to develop themselves. So those are ideas to apply in primary grade classroom using differentiated text selection and using flexible grouping. So what about if you want to apply differentiated instruction in intermediate classroom? Well, we can use differentiated instruction using continuum of graphic organizers in an intermediate classroom. How? What Staffes et al. Provide more detailed picture on how intermediate classroom differentiated instruction can be done using a continuum of graphic organizers through another teaching vignette of Mrs. Manley's classroom. So how does Mrs. Manley's differentiated instruction work here? First, she identifies attributes used to compare and contrast for the students, and let the students identify the attributes to use compare and contrast. Second, the students will independently construct a paragraph summarizing similarities and differences from the text. Then next, the teacher will provide a continuum of differentiated graphic organizers based on variation in student needs. So, how does Mrs. Manley knows about the student needs? She does that based on formative data collected during previous writing workshops of the students. And what are the graphic organizers? It can be in forms of text maps, pattern guides, retelling permits, and question guides. So those are different based on the levels of the students, and they were used to provide to increasing the levels of support. Let's try to discuss further about each of the graphic organizer. The first one is text map. So what is text map? Text map is a graphic organizer that provides a visual representation of both the important concept from the text and the informational text structure. Or Mrs. Manley will use different graphic organizer to different level of student, like pattern guide. So pattern guide is a type of graphic organizer that includes the scaffolding effect of a sample idea, detail, and attribute. What about retelling pyramids? In retelling pyramids, students are provided additional text language support. And who is this for? It's for students who needed more language support to construct paragraph. And the last graphic organizer type is question guide. So in question guide, it offered significant linguistic structure by providing the question, same or different choice, and the necessary signal words to create a sentence. So we kind of know that these graphic organizers are going to do with different level of students. Using a continuum of differentiated graphic organizers, the students in Mrs. Manley's class are able to discuss the similarities and differences between the animals that is constructed in the paragraphs using 4 important attributes from the text. And when we try to learn deeper about the decision making or the research and decision making behind Mrs. Manley's differentiation, is that we learn that it is not differentiated the product of the instruction, but it's actually differentiated the process of instruction. And so there are 2 key points on the research of her decision making. The first one, her decision is actually based on the collaboration with the colleagues. So teachers and specialists in her school on the intermediate grade team have been focused on effective instruction using informational text. Working together with colleagues is very important towards her decision. And the second one is about her focus on text structures. So actually she selected graphic organizers based on her understanding of the importance of teaching informational text structures. So she's focusing on the 4 most frequently used structures in elementary informational texts. They are enumeration, time order, compare and contrast, cause and effect. And in this example of teaching vignettes, she's using compare and contrast. Learning from Mrs. Manley's differentiated instruction, there are several ideas for us to apply. First one, we have to clearly define the outcome of students should accomplish. And then look carefully at your formative data to determine each student's strengths and needs relative to the desired outcome. The other one is that we have to be carefully describe the range of students' needs. And plus, we have to consider the array of the differentiation strategies you might use to scaffold your students toward the outcome. And the last one, please offer differentiation that is consistent with the individual student needs. When we talk about differentiated instruction, what is the description of differentiated instruction that is effective? Susan Watt-Staves et al. Tried to wrap up with the ideas of what characteristics of differentiated instruction which is effective. These are common characteristics of effective differentiation. Number 1, there's in-depth knowledge of students' literacy needs, not only reading, but also oral language, as well as their strengths and interests. Second one, there should be methods to monitor students' progress. So teachers just not only doing the differentiated instruction without any monitoring. No, it doesn't work that way. And when differentiated instruction effective, it should include in-depth knowledge of reading process and evidence or research-based practices that is associated with instruction and assessment. And plus, it should use the core literacy curriculum more flexibly and creatively than the publisher recommends. Many times, teachers are just inspired only what the publisher recommends, but actually teachers can go beyond that. And teachers should also emphasize on teaching components of strategic reading. And the last one, there should be a development process of systems or routines to support differentiation. Okay, after discussion of a very interesting topics of differentiated instruction, I would like to have several questions for you to reflect, and please vote on T2L, the two reflection questions here. The first one, students in differentiated classroom face several standards to deal with their future assessment. There are at least 3 things to consider: common core standards, WIDA standards, and partnership for the assessment of readiness for college and careers. It is mentioned that this is where the art of teaching enters in, and where the expertise and knowledge of individual teachers working with specific students take over, according to Taylor and Duke. Do you think it is true that teacher really has the right to do art? If yes, how do you think they do it? And do you think teacher will be able to do quality control on their art? How will they do that? That's the first reflection questions. And the second one, despite its positive effects of differentiated instruction to differentiated classroom students, do you think there are possible negative effects? How can it be possible? Please give example. So please respond these reflection questions in D2L within the thread of this webinar. Your ideas and thinking are really appreciated. To wrap up this discussion, I provide you a video about differentiated instruction.
Diversity has become a defining feature of Alberta's classrooms. Students come to school with a wide range of interests and abilities, and diverse learning strengths and needs, including students with disabilities. Differentiated instruction is a philosophy that acknowledges that students learn at different rates and in many different ways. Differentiated instruction benefits students because it promotes an environment in which learning differences are not just tolerated, they are valued. Carol Ann Tomlinson, one of the early advocates of this approach, describes differentiation as shaking up what goes on in the classroom so that students have multiple opportunities to explore concepts, make sense of ideas, and demonstrate what they know and understand. Differentiated instruction can take many forms. For example, teachers can provide materials and learning tasks at different levels of challenge, or provide different levels of support in the classroom, depending on student needs. When done effectively, differentiated instruction is a seamless part of everyday instructional planning and classroom practice. It is woven throughout the school day and informs how physical space of the classroom is organized, what learning resources are used, how instruction is planned and delivered, how student learning is assessed. The very nature of differentiated instruction means that it will look very different in every learning environment, depending on the students, teachers, and learning contexts. Differentiated instruction begins with knowing who students are as learners. Effective differentiation also depends on knowing how and when to use multiple instruction strategies so that students have opportunities to learn in multiple ways. Ongoing classroom assessment is also key to differentiated instruction. Assessment informs instructional planning and provides snapshots of what students understand and can do. Another hallmark of differentiated instruction is the use of flexible groupings. With flexible groupings, students are grouped and regrouped over the course of the school day and throughout the school year. Typical groupings include whole class instruction, small group instruction, one-to-one instruction, peer teaching pairs, partner learning, independent learning activities, cooperative small group learning. This flexible way of organizing groups allows for targeted small group instruction with students who share similar learning needs, interests, or learning preferences. It is essential that group membership be flexible and ever-changing to allow students to work with different peers in a variety of situations. Students need opportunities to work in group settings that they are comfortable with, as well as those that challenge them to learn and grow. Differentiated instruction can enhance a teacher's ability to reach all learners. Research shows that differentiated instruction can particularly benefit students with disabilities, English language learners, students who are gifted, students considered at risk for not completing school. A differentiated approach builds on evidence-based practices in an intentional and systematic manner, and differentiated instruction allows teachers to provide the best learning experience for all students in their classroom. For more information on supporting every student, visit the Alberta Education website.
Alright, so in addition, these are some resources that will help you to get more understanding in differentiated instruction. There's this website belongs to Scholastic that you can find articles of strategies in differentiating instruction, and then website from ASCD about the differentiating instruction, and you can even visit Carol Tomlinson website that you can find lots of information and you can register, and you can find very wonderful articles in differentiated instruction in also eric.ed.gov. In addition, if you want to find Illinois Principals Association understanding and information about leading differentiated instruction in your building K-12 classes, then you can visit this website. And the last one, you can also visit Alberta Education Inclusion Information website. So, and these are the references that I use to facilitate these webinars. I really enjoy having this discussion with you. I hope you do too. And I hope this discussion will help our understanding towards differentiated instruction. I'm looking forward to read your responses and ideas from the reflection questions that I posted. Thank you very much.